afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this month's live stream. We from here at the Folke Institute, we are your hosts. I am Selena Konmacki, and this is Anna Larson we're the marketing live stream host. So welcome to our show.
Yes, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you here today. So the Folke Institute is bringing important conversations to the table through these live streams. We're hoping that what this does is help you grow personally, help you grow professionally, help you build a stronger workplace team, and have conversations that can be really tough conversations about topics that make people uncomfortable. But we are bringing those topics to this table because they are so important and your organization does need to be thinking about them. So let's just jump right into it, Selena. Let's introduce Carrie, Dr. Carrie, and then Ron, and then get them up here and start having those conversations. You're muted right now. Sorry.
That took us 1 minute for somebody to have to say that today, guys. All right. So if you are not of this universe and do not know who Dr. Carrie is, she's one of my favorite people, but you need to know who this wonderful human being is, Dr. Carrie Spell-Hansson. She is the CEO and founder of the Folke Institute. She is a thought leader, researcher, educator, and trusted advisor in organizational development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You'll hear it called DEI, and coaching. She founded the Folke Institute in 2004 to further the impactful work she was doing. You can read more about her by just coming to our website and following her on LinkedIn and all the fabulous places. So we're going to move on to her fabulous guest who, I don't know, Anna, can I just jump in for a second and say, how lucky are we that we get to meet all these fabulous guests that Dr. Carrie says, I want to talk with them this month. I mean, and they say yes. Okay. So that leads us to.
Yes, that leads us to our guest today, Ron Taylor. Ron is the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the United States for Natixis Investment Managers. Now, Ron has a very wide background. He leads programs, activities, and serves as a resource for the affiliates in the region to support the DEI efforts. So remember, DEI being diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is really like the foundation of what our show is about today. He has 20 years of experience leading these kinds of programs, primarily in the financial services industry. He maintains an active presence in the financial industry forums converging on DEI matters and holds a seat on both the Investment Company Institute and the Money Management Institute Diversity and Inclusion Committees. So this is his life. He is immersed in this conversation. So I'm thrilled to be able to join him today. We have more information about all the great things he's done, the champions, the awards, his lifetime membership in the National Association of Black Accountants. He earned a Bachelor's of Science from Business Management at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and he holds a Certified Public Accountant CPA designation as well. So with all of that, I mean, we could go on forever about all the many amazing things that both Carrie and Ron have done, but I think we just bring them up here and then let them wow us with their words, right?
Yes, let's bring on Ron and Dr. Carrie. Hi, Ron. Hi, Dr. Carrie.
Hi there.
Okay, guys, wait. We have one little message we'd like to share today before we start our live stream. Ron, go ahead and tell everybody.
Yeah, so anything that I say today will be my own and not necessarily reflect Natixis or the Natixis family. So all remarks are mine.
Yeah, because we have wild conversations on here, don't we, Dr. Carrie?
Yes, we do.
Well, Ron, thank you so much for joining us and like just kind of being part of the conversations that Dr. Carrie loves to have. And I'll share with you, right? When we were like, Dr. Carrie, we should do this. Oh, I'm not sure. Now she loves doing them. I know she does. She's always so pumped up after each conversation, and it just allows her another way to connect with people in her space stratosphere, right?
Yeah, so yes. Well, and speaking of people that we connect with, we want to just encourage anyone who is here with us live today, drop comments, leave us conversation, like tell us where you're listening from. Like, let's say hi to Rebecca, who's joining us from New Jersey. Hi, Rebecca. Just let us know what your thoughts are about the conversation. We want to hear what you have to say as well. Yeah. So drop that into the comments on whatever platform you're listening in, or if you're catching the replay, feel free to drop those comments in as well. And we look forward to having you participate actively in our live stream today.
Yeah, let's get started, Anna. Right? Like, where are we going to start? Can we pop
We're going
this
to
up?
start with a quote. We love to start with a quote every time. This is kind of the focal point of one of the it's a social media post that the Folke Institute does every month, where we come up with a quote that just kind of embodies maybe a thought that we want people to have, as part of their month. So today says, there is no standard normal. Normal is subjective. There are 7 billion versions of normal on this planet. And that is a quote by Matt Haig. And so I guess with our first question really comes down to Carrie saying, Carrie, why is this something that's important that the Folke Institute would want to share with people?
Well, first of all, hello to everyone, and thank you, Ron, for being here. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you live and other people listening, because we've had wonderful conversations about this issue and subject matter, the two of us. So I'm very pleased to take it to this platform and have the conversation. And that's a very interesting quote, because basically it's true. And what I would say is that there is a standard, a normal standard. And there's 7 billion of them. There's 7 billion normal standards, because my standard of normal would be very different from yours, depending on where you grew up, where you live, the culture you grew up in. There's so many different things. So I love the quote, because if we can begin to recognize that there's no one way of doing things, there's no one right way of behaving. So that's the reason why I love the quote.
Ron, is there anything you would add to that? Like, when you read this, what does it bring to mind?
Oh, it definitely. Well, thank you, Dr. Carrie and Anna and Selena, for having me. This is awesome. Just got off a plane from Miami, and I was racing down to my office. I threw on the jacket, but really looking forward to this. But this really does resonate. I would almost say that there's maybe 7 billion in one, because sometimes I think I have couple of different normals, but it's amazing. For 25 years I've mentored and helped students that wanted to get into financial services, and one thing that I've said to them consistently is just be yourself, because everybody else is taken. So as you come into this profession, don't think that you have to be like the person to your left or your right. You have to be your normal. So I really like this quote.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because when you're talking about normal and you hear people say something like, that's not normal, or that's not the way we do things, right? I mean, it really it stymies the creativity and the possibilities, and puts us in little boxes that maybe we don't necessarily fit so well in, right?
Absolutely. When I hear somebody say, that's not how we do things around here, I run. Because that is like death talk right there. It's just like, no, we got to do things differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, yeah, I loved the reminder of that, right? The reminder that, hey, what you just said, Ron, right? This is not how we do things around here. It's just, it's a wonderful reminder. No, thanks for both sharing your thoughts on that. So I think we're going to start with our very first question. And Ron, we're going to put you in I think we're going to direct the first question to you. So I may have mentioned on previous live streams, I am from Hawaii. I am a native Hawaiian. And so this past month, we had our annual Merry Monarch Festival. And, its central purpose of the festival is for the perpetuation, preservation, and the promotion of the art of hula. And in the Hawaiian culture, that's actually how we kept the stories of our ancestors alive. That's how we story told and documented, right? And so I guess my question to you, Ron, is right, hula is not just about hand movement and hips, so it's a powerful part of a heritage and culture, but can you share with us how you and your company utilize storytelling to build your corporate culture, and why it's so important?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have to tell you, I've been to Maui once about 20 years ago. We're going again in August for our daughter's high school graduation. So I'm excited to be going back, and just felt that culture and that tradition there. But I think for me, I've been with Natixis now for just over a year. They're coming up on a year and a half, I guess. And one of the things that I know, being in this field for so long, over 20 years, is storytelling, you have to be able to tell your story, because if you don't tell your story, somebody else will tell it for you. And 99.9% chance that they'll get it wrong. And so it's really important. And I really stress within Natixis that we want to hear your story. There's 450 or so employees in our Boston office. And I say, I want to talk to 450 people every single day. And that's really my goal, is to get up from my desk, have conversations. I'm the guy talking in the elevator. And I just think it's so important that you know who you're dealing with and who you're talking to in a work setting, so that you can sort of optimize. So incredibly important. I think it's critical. And so that's really something that I drive within Natixis.
So I'm curious, right? Like when you talk, it really ties back into the quote we talked about at the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea of your story. If you don't tell your story, if you don't have your own version of who you are, and if you're not sharing that, then somebody's going to make something up about who you are and box you in.
Sure.
And create a space where you don't have the opportunity to share your true self. What does that do to a company? Like if I'm to the company culture, let's broaden that a little bit. If your employees feel that kind of boxed in, what has been your experience in terms of what that's done to a company culture?
You get no innovation, you get no creativity, you get no authenticity in that kind of culture. You get a lot of folks trying to be just like and assimilate and just be like the person sitting to their left and their right. Companies don't grow that way. You know, if companies stagnate and everybody's just kind of doing the same thing all the time and you're not innovating and creating, then you're not around. And, you know, lots of companies that aren't around anymore because they couldn't make that pivot. And so that's why I say it's critical. It's absolutely critical. And I always start with my own story. So when I'm in our town halls or talking to a group, I always tell my own story, because it's not, and you saw my bio, you saw, you know, not necessarily a linear professional career, but also, and I was sharing with Dr. Carrie, I grew up maybe less than 2 miles from where you are now, where you're sitting. And I grew up in the Orchard Park housing projects. And I'll date myself, but I grew up with New Edition. If anybody listening remembers. It was super humble beginnings. It's actually a picture from the Boston Globe. It's around 1972. It's a stark black and white picture, and it's actually my street. And you can see our apartment in that housing project complex. And I tell that part of the story. I talk about the single parent. I talk about the government assistance. I talk about how education was a differentiator. And then I go on to how does all of that sort of impact, and how do I bring that to the work environment?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much, Ron, because I think what you're doing is you're allowing all these bridges, like, to be able to connect with somebody on so many different levels, right? You might have a powerhouse engineer he grew up with a single mom, and you guys can have a richer, deeper type of conversation where maybe he wouldn't, you know what I mean? If there's that closed off, like, I want you to just come and just perform, and then, we know there's those environments, but I think there's definitely a more impactful company when it's in there. Dr. Carrie, I'm gonna ask you what, we're gonna put you in the seat here and ask you, how has storytelling supported the culture here that we have at TFI?
Well, first of all, when you think, one of the things that when I'm teaching, I share with people that we don't, just what Ron was speaking about, people don't think of the fact that organizations and companies have culture also. Okay, and cultures are built from the foundation. When you hire someone and you bring them into the company, they have to assess what the culture is. Generally, during the interview process, what they think is like, okay, this is a culture, or they may not even use that word, but this is a place that I could probably fit into, And so then they come in, and then oftentimes people leave organizations because it's not a good fit. And part of how you become infused in the culture, to me, is like a tapestry. Okay, because when you're willing to allow people to share them stories, to share who they are, and you begin to use and tap into that, because then they can function from a place of sharing their story. And also, what we want in organizations right now is we want buy-in, we want ownership, we want people to own, like at TFI. I want people to own what they do and who they are in the company. I tell people I don't need another Carrie. I don't need another person. I don't want anybody with my vision. Bring your vision to the table because that's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to evolve. And we do that like with Ron by telling stories because you guys know my stories. And I'm always telling stories and using stories and analogies, love analogies, because it helps us to hone in and get a visual of what it is that we're talking about, what it is that we want to create. And it also brings joy. And the most important thing, when you think about diversity, one of the richest things that you get from diversity is this amazing tapestry when the organization or the company is willing to listen to other people's story and incorporate and let them know that they have space to show, to grow, and to create, because that's where you're going to get that creativity. Right,
Yeah.
Ron?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm hopelessly curious, and and I've been guilty myself of coming into an organization and assessing somebody without hearing anything about them and making up an entire story in my mind because they've got on the right suit and they've got the right hair and the right watch, and so I tell the story, but then I spend time with that person and I realize I was so far off. So I'm constantly slowing myself down and not saying, not every white male has the same story that came into corporate America. Everybody didn't have a spoon. Everybody didn't drive a BMW at 16. And they're just, you have to, like, at least for myself personally, I have to slow myself down and make sure that I'm making that effort to hear the story.
I don't think it's just you, Ron, honestly. I really think that if people were more conscientious of those biases that they have, right, then they would recognize the need to slow down and do exactly what you're talking about. Take the time to find out what those stories are so that you can create that culture of creativity, innovation, teamwork. I mean, all those things that every company and organization wants for their employee and their workforce,
Sure.
I don't even know if I'm able to say this, but you can just tell how Ron and Dr. Carrie are passionate about storytelling and the connection because of how they met. They met on a plane.
Yes. I love
met on a plane.
Several times.
Several times. And so there's this, you know what I mean? And can you imagine had there not been, I think this is just an example of when you are wanting to connect and when you're wanting to, what that can open up for you. And because Ron and Dr. Carrie were open to telling stories, and the universe just kept putting them together, saying, hey, you guys need to know each other. So right, Dr. Carrie, you could have been on the flight an hour later and never seen Ron, right?
Exactly. And I do believe it and just like the way we met, because of the work that we do, it's affirming, to meet people in such an interesting way or unique way, if you will. And then to find out, it was just so incredibly exciting to, like, oh my God, we do the same stuff. Listen, and we just talk the entire time. And each time we meet, that becomes the conversation, because there's so much agreement in terms of the vision for what's possible. If we can look at it from that perspective, right, Ron, that what's possible, what we can do and what we can create. There's enough room at the table in any and every organization, community, educational institution, whatever. There's enough room for everybody, to come and to bring prior to, and this being Diversity Month, one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, prior to actually making this, giving this such a platform, it was all about going into organizations and creating this cookie cutter environment. And so now getting people to the place where they realize that's not going to lead to success, because we're going to continue to become more multicultural, if you will, and the value that brings to each of us, the richness. And I think young people, when I look at the different generations, young people acknowledge and recognize that more than ever, more than older, I should say other groups, if you will. Okay, we think in terms of generations. I'll say it like that. Okay, seasoned. Okay, just being able to recognize that and have less of a fear toward this idea of coming together. Before, we used to talk about being a melting pot. When I think of a melting pot, I think of fondue. I mean, it's just like all melt. You don't recognize anything. It just looks like cheese. You know what I mean? So it's like we get one that we're not a melting pot. We're kind of like a salad. We come together, and I like the uniqueness and the taste of each, because each piece of vegetable, if you will, or whatever you put in your salad, has its own story, and
Mhm.
and together it gives a really good flavor and taste. I must be hungry, right?
No, you just made me hungry.
Definitely. It's so interesting, Dr. Carrie, what you just said, because I think for the seasoned, and I'm going to go with seasoned as well, for a lot of the folks that I work with in corporate that are seasoned and are starting to think about, sort of transitioning out of, financial services or corporate America, it's a lot of the questions are like, what do you want your legacy to be? Like when you look at this environment in 3 years, when you're sitting on a beach or wherever, and you're looking in or you're reading the paper, what do you want to see, knowing that this diversity is coming into corporate, knowing that things are changing and things need to be different? So working with some of the more seasoned folks, I really do use that as a leverage point to say, okay, how are we going to make this part of your legacy?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's a perfect lead into our next question, Ron. It's almost like you knew what was coming next on the list here. But yeah, we did want to start with storytelling. I mean, you guys said a salad bowl, and I think tapestry, Carrie, is another word you used. And I love that Maya Angelou quote where she talks about a rich tapestry, and every thread is bright and colorful, but equal in value, right? And so when we talk about that storytelling and creating that company culture, and what that comes back to is recognizing diversity, but also having equitable opportunity and having places where everybody feels like they're included and belong, right? I mean, that's what DEI is, like at its very core. So our second question today really comes with why, and I'm going to add in the word and how, right? Why and how are companies missing the mark when it comes to advancing DEI? Because there's a lot of like lip service to DEI, right? And the term, the words people are saying, we're doing it, we're doing it, we're doing it. But we also hear a lot of it's not working or it's not actually happening. So what would you say to this, Ron?
I would say that a lot of companies look for the easy way out. And when I think about my first 10 years in diversity and going back to, so it's an accountant and then early 2000s got into the diversity work, a lot of firms just said, we just need people, just bring folks. We need percentages. We need, to get the numbers up without actually thinking about who those people were. And there was no focus on equity, and there was no focus on sort of systems and how systems were maybe not were imbalanced in terms of how this new talent was coming in, this diverse talent was coming in, and there certainly wasn't a lot of effort or initiative around inclusion either. So it was really just a numbers game. And then you kind of I guess you wake up and you realize that like, not all Black men are the same. Not all Black women have the same experience. Not all women have the same experience. And so you have to get into that harder work we were talking about earlier of really getting to know who's coming to the table and what they bring and what value they bring. So I think companies have missed it because of taking the easy way out and really just said, let's make this a numbers game. Let's make sure recruiting, we're getting the right percentages and we're hitting those marks, and we'll even go public with those. And that's easy. That's easy. Getting to know your people and really getting to know how they fit and how they add value to your organization, and making sure that they're operating at 110% to do that. That's harder work. And so I think that's really why it's been missed.
Yeah. Carrie, I know that you're a big part of your focus is on women who face disrespect, right? What would you say about that in terms of like what Ron just said about missing the mark with DEI in organizations? Like, how does that experience you have play into this?
I would, first of all, just piggybacking on what he's saying, is that so many organizations still have that same concept or mentality, if you will, and that is let's just get some background of people in there, or women in the organization. And what's unfair, not only to the organization, also to the individual, oftentimes people are put into positions where they're not necessarily qualified for, and there's a lot of pressure there. Right after the George Floyd, a lot of companies went out and decided, oh, we're going to have a DEI person. It doesn't matter that they don't have the background. They just have the exterior, the external appearance, if you will, that will satisfy. The other part of it too is you miss the mark if you haven't infused DEI into your strategic plan, your strategic initiative. You have to be willing to say that not only are we going to get women and people of color into the organization in certain positions, what is the plan on the pipeline to get them into leadership positions? Number one. The second thing is, it's like, what are we going to do to support them, and what do we want them to be able to do? Because now I'm going to look at the resumes and the vitas. I'm going to look at them to make sure that I'm getting people that have the background and the experience to be successful in the work that we're hiring them to do. Because otherwise you get the backdrop of people within the organization that's saying, oh, this person was just hired because of the color of their skin, or because of the fact that they're a woman, and they don't even have the credentials to do the job. So we call that the glass cliff, okay? Where you bring people into organizations where they are bound to fail. And I talk a lot about that in my research with women, that you bring them into an organization that's fledgling or flailing, if you will. And there's no way they're going to be able to bring it back. See, I told you I brought some women in and they don't know what they're doing. But it's a setup.
Yeah.
It's a setup.
Major setup. And, those companies that jumped in and got very woke following George Floyd's murder, they didn't do us a lot of service in that. Right. So I think it made it more difficult. And I'll share this, and it's not in the bio, but I actually work. So Natixis Investment Managers is based in Boston, where I grew up. But I moved from Boston to New York, New Jersey about 25 years ago, chasing my wife. And we still live in Central Jersey. And a big part of the reason that I trek up and get on a plane and get to meet wonderful people like Dr. Carrie every week is because the commitment of the leadership at Natixis in Boston is exactly what I think we need. They've got that curiosity, they've got that positioning, they understand that it's a long game. It's not just let's get some bodies in it. And working with that kind of leadership makes a tremendous difference. So
now I can imagine, like, just if you know that there is an investment on their part and they know it is a long game, it just makes the collaboration, right? Like meaningful, and you're working for a great organization.
I'm going to go off script for just a second here, right? I'm going to throw a question your way because you just, you get my mind going and my brain thinking, right? I know. Yeah. Don't scroll. It's not on there, Ron. Mike, so when you have leadership that's essentially just checking a box, as opposed to really infusing DEI into the foundation of what their company is, what do you do with that? How do you address that? And can you do anything about it, really, ultimately?
You mean the ones that are checking the box?
Yeah, the ones that are just checking the box and saying, we got it. We hired somebody. It's done. Wipe my hands of it. We fulfilled our requirement in this area,
I'll call you right back. and you never call. That doesn't work. And that was the modus operandi for a long time. It was like, let's employee resource groups, and let's celebrate some heritage months, and let's put all the emphasis on our diverse employees, or our women that are coming in to kind of elevate this. Exactly. And I'll sit over here and write checks and feel really good. That model is never worked. It was always broken. And really does need to be just thrown out the window. So if you do have leaders that are checking the box, I would say maybe it's not a place that's going to be impactful in this space. You really want to find, and I'll talk about our CEO. David Junta is our CEO at Natixis Investment Managers. I wasn't thrilled about going up to Boston, I'll be honest, but I went up and I met with him. It was the first meeting. And in that 75-minute lunch, he asked more curious questions and really just showed like an interest and a real sincere kind of commitment to this. He also positioned it, and I think a lot of companies could benefit from this, So I'm part of the executive committee. So I'm one of 12 at the table. So it's not, and it's not that there's anything wrong with HR, because they are incredible partners at Natixis, but it's really difficult sometimes when you're kind of buried someplace under talent
That's right.
to be effective and have impact. So I do think that they were very intentional, very thoughtful in how they positioned it, what they wanted to do, and how they wanted to do it. So again, that's one of the reasons I check up to Boston every week.
I thought that was a great off-script answer, Ron. Yeah.
I know, and you know what? It's so incredible.
Well, the truth is easy.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you know what? I always say, and the truth is simple. We don't have to like study and rehearse and try to memorize the truth. It just is. It's interesting because I've been having conversations with my son who lives on the West Coast, who grew up with a mother like me. So you guys know me well enough to know who I am and how I speak. So he was really confused, and he's in higher ed, okay, in education, and finally able to articulate the place where he's going next. Is that he couldn't figure out what was missing. He goes like, I don't think the place has soul initially is what he said, but then it went on to understand, because you see some people, there's a few people of color there, but they haven't harnessed it to the point where it's real. It's a reality. It has to be lived. And so my approach to him and my conversation with him is like, they don't know how to do that. Okay, they don't know how to break that barrier of the extremes. It's like, well, look, we're bringing some people in that are people of color, and we expect them to do it, but they don't. And the people that they're bringing in do not have where I sit, they don't have the experience, okay, or the knowledge. They weren't hired with the experience and the knowledge to actually pierce through the culture, if you will, because it requires revamping a culture. And cultures are embedded in organizations just as they are in our lives. And to untangle like the language that we use at the Folke Institute, to teach the process of unlearning to these folks, to learn, requires people having the experience and the skill on how to do that in such a way where people are not crushed, fearful, shut down, and all of that. So being able to walk that fine balance and do it. And so we had a very, very good conversation. So I don't know if he's going to pack up and run and do something else or not, but it's a good learning experience for him.
No,
Yeah.
Oh,
I think,
sorry.
no, I was just going to say, just to kind of like close out this question here. Like, I want to just put out like almost like a call to action, or not or a challenge, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to make it too like ta-da kind of in that way. But really, if you're listening and you are in that management structure and you have a position of leadership, like, I would love for people to just really stop and think like, am I just checking a box, or am I truly trying to infuse this into every aspect of what my company is doing? Because I think that if you really sit down and ask yourselves that question, you're going to find gaps where you are just doing lip service, right? And that's where people like you, Ron, and you, Carrie, and what the Folke Institute actually does, right? That's where you come in and you can help support organizations that really are dedicated to making a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, I'm beating up on the metrics and, the targets and sort of the aspirations that companies set. I mean, and I covered mostly financial services. So I'm not saying throw all the numbers out and don't care about the numbers, but you use those as a starting point. Sure. And they're part of your broader sort of strategy, your broader plan for changing the culture and bringing in the talent, the diverse talent that you're looking at. Sure. And I kind of use, and Dr. Carey, you talked about analogies, but I think about I always talk about field of dreams, if you will. And shifting it that way and thinking, well, build the culture that folks want to be a part of. We won't have to go out there and dance our way and lie to get the folks.
Yeah, gosh, that was actually really great.
The last thing I want to say on that, which is really interesting, is is getting people to a place where they realize that this is not like a formula. You're like baking a cake. You just need 2/3 of this, a cup of that. It's not. That's not. It's like this is hard work. Okay, unlearning and relearning is hard work. and it doesn't happen overnight. I remember years ago, someone I went into an organization, and they told me, and I was with the senior exec, and they were like, "We just want you to do diversity." How do you do diversity? How do you do this thing? And it was really interesting. Well, I don't know how to do diversity, but can you come in with your magic wand and wave it and
Uh-huh.
make it happen? And that's not, again, part of it is real, and you begin to realize wins along the way. I believe, and you can tell me what you think, Ron. I believe that as you move in this direction, it becomes noticeable very very early on. People know when you're being authentic. People
Yes.
know when they feel like they're a part of something that's greater than themselves. So I don't think it's a hard work. It's a long journey. I just think
Mhm.
that the evidence of what's being done
Mhm.
happens almost immediately.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Where to, Anna?
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get immersed into the conversation, and I feel like a bobblehead a lot because I'm just constantly like, yes, but let's shift into the second to last question. But Ron, what do you see for up and coming programs and initiatives, and how are they pushing corporate accountability?
how do
I-
you do diversity, Ron?
How do you do
Yeah.
diversity? First, get your magic wand. And wave your magic wand 3 times on
There
the
you
Tuesday.
go.
On the
I,
Tuesday.
I hope you have a fun animation on
Uh,
slide 1 with your wand when you do your talks, Ron, because I bet that's impactful.
if that worked, then I wouldn't have been doing this for 22 years. I would have retired.
I know, right?
It's interesting because corporate America is changing. Flexible work and where people and how people work and how people are recognized for the work that they're doing. All of that is in the mix now. And so it's kind of like I think it's an opportunity to look at doing things differently. And I think a lot of good companies are doing that. And they're looking at their workforce and they're looking at how folks work and they're looking at, it's like, if you go out and you say, we only want the best and the brightest and the type A's and the folks that get it done, and we want you to join our firm, and then you treat all of those individuals like 7-year-olds, you're doing yourself a disservice. Saying, if I keep
Exactly.
you're not working, and et cetera, et cetera. If you really got the right individuals coming in, they're going to get the work done, whether it's 9 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning.
That's
And I
right.
think that's a shift that's coming. And so I think a lot of the initiatives now are looking at this new sort of work environment and just this work structure and saying, how can we leverage this, still bring in those really good employees and leverage this new structure, this new way of getting business done, and make sure that we're optimizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that goes back to you saying, right? Like, if you build it, they will come. If you create the right infrastructure, the
Mhm.
right people will come and create that culture you're wanting to build, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
much of it is tied together too, because
Mhm.
this also jumps straight back to our storytelling conversation as well. You
That's
can build it, but the only way you know you have the right people is if you really dig into who they are, what their value sets are, where they come from, what their experience has been, because all of that will play a role in advancing what your company wants to do.
No, absolutely. I say the only thing worse than somebody disengaging and leaving a firm is disengaging and staying at a firm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And the other part of it too, when you think about where we are right now, what has happened with the pandemic and the social unrest that has happened over the last several years, it just catapult us into the shift, the change that must take place. It's not, and organizations, as you can see, I just heard this morning, and I kind of thought it was happening. Bed Bath and Beyond just folded.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
and I just going into the stores over the last couple of months and just seeing how things were looking, and I'm not surprised. What I am going to say is the importance of recognizing that, first of all, change is the only constant. And
Mhm.
what has happened over the 3 years, the pandemic and all of the things that have happened, and with the 5 generations in the workplace, there
Mhm.
is no other choice for any company or corporation other than to rethink how they're doing things, and what will be in the best interest of the people as well as the organization and the profitability of the organization. I
Yeah.
truly believe that that's where we are right now.
Oh,
And you're for, and it's not like you can't say, well, I'm just going to ignore and bury my head in the sand, because if you bury your head in the sand, you will be buried. The company will be buried. That's what I
absolutely.
see happening.
Yeah, I remember coming into accounting. So it was a career change from the childcare, but when I was coming in, we were still using green sheets to do our audits.
Mm-hmm.
5-column green sheets, and then computers started to come in. And I'll tell you, any accounting firm or financial service firm or anybody that said, you know what, I'm just going to pretend, I'm just going to keep using my green sheets over here, they're not in business anymore.
That's right.
Or if they
That's
are,
right.
they got like one client. It's probably
Yeah.
like
It's more
Right.
seasoned than they are and wants to
it really is that kind of shift.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
if
that's
you don't
right.
get this now, then you're gonna miss the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So then
Yeah.
what would be your final call to action or your final thoughts as we're kind of rounding down this conversation today, like with speaking to the people that are watching live now or catching the replay a little bit later, like, I mean, I love where this conversation has gone. It's just a like circling around, right? All of the same kind of points being brought back with every single piece of the conversation. So what would you say would be your final thought or your final, like, I'm going to use a call to action, because what I really want is for you to say, this is next. Like, this is what you should be doing, because you are an expert in this, right? I mean, this is what you do.
Is this for me or Dr. Carrie?
Oh, yeah. For you, Ron, you grab it
Oh,
first.
you know what? I'd sum it up really simple. I'd say, don't be scared. I think too many people are afraid. You get a lot of folks that are afraid of saying the wrong things or doing the wrong things. And I think if you don't do anything to the point we just made, then you're going to miss out on a ton of opportunity. You probably won't be in business long. But I'd say, if you're going to, and there's this great quote by Shiv Kara I loved for years, and I still do. It's leaders don't do different things; they do things differently.
Yeah.
And I think it's really time for our leaders to do things differently.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And that's so true. That like needs to be on something and sent out. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, hey, just put this on your desk to remind yourself, like, how to be an impactful leader. I love that, Ron. Dr. Carrie, we're gonna have you share your final thoughts on
Well, one of the things that is so incredibly important is for leaders, managers, people to begin to understand is that DEI is not some little separate thing over in the corner. Okay, it has to be infused in everything that you do. One of the things that we're developing and ready to launch now is a program for managers managing in this time. What is required of managers today to be successful in the changing organization, if you will? And as you can imagine, Ron, DEI is such a huge part of the actual training. Having empathy, being able to understand, being able to having good listening skills, all of these things that are so incredibly, and flexibility, authentic, all of those things are so incredibly important. The call to action is being willing to, if you're bringing people in to do work with your organization or to support you, or hiring people for that matter, look for the requisite skills necessary for them to help you make the leap, to make the leap, make the walk, if you, whatever you want to call it, on this journey. Because as you know, and those of you that you guys are part of the organization, I always said that the journey is the destination. There's no place to get to. The journey is right now. And what we're doing right now. So that, to me, that's the call to action, is remembering that it is now is the time to be on the journey, be committed to the journey, and rally the support to help you.
And if I could just add one other thing, because I could go forever on this, but going back to the storytelling and so one question that I challenge all of my Natixis family with is, what's your why? And it's not necessarily your why for why you're doing this or why you're committing to this. Maybe you have a why for why you're not doing it. Yeah. But on either side of that, you need to really question and figure out what your why is behind diversity, equity, inclusion. And that's for every single employee in the organization.
I feel like what you
Yeah.
just said is really important, right? There's a why for doing, but there's also a why for not
Mhm.
doing.
Not doing it. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we forget that. Like we think that's negative, but it's not negative. Like you should have and it's really about being purposeful, right?
Hmm.
Like being intentional and purposeful when you do make these decisions.
Yeah.
Whether you're a leader and a manager or you're an employee of a workforce, I
Mhm.
mean,
That's right.
it matters across the board because all those stories intertwined is what we're talking about here, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's awesome.
this was a great, great, great conversation. Ron, you just said it. I could just sit here and just
Yeah.
listen to questions between you and Dr. Carrie and just learn. And, we could play some New Edition in the back as well.
I could have been the 6th edition if I could sing and dance.
Oh, you were this close. Dang. Oh, that would have been so
There's
awesome.
still time. Never
Yes.
say never, Ron. Never say never.
Okay.
Well, my
And
wife and I,
listen, we will have an opportunity. Ron and I will have an opportunity at some point to catch up to continue this conversation on a plane to or from Boston at some point. We know this, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Carrie, you're gonna have to make Ron do a New Edition dance just because,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Okay.
nobody needs to see that.
Your family's like, oh, Dad, no,
Make
not
this part
again.
of your story. I
Yeah.
needed to be part of your story at this
Right.
point. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
That was huge. The beginnings were huge. But
Right.
Dr. Carrie, thank you so much, and Anna
Thank
and
you.
Selena, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think call to action, and for the
Yeah.
folks on the line, just let's
Yes.
get this done.
No, for sure. Hey, Ron, we'd love for everybody to kind of just know, if they want to continue conversations or just follow what you're doing, could you just share these two places that you'd love to connect?
Yep. So you have our external Natixis website. Are they seeing this, or do you want me to?
Yeah, they're seeing
Okay.
it. Mm-hmm.
So our external Natixis website, where you see more information on some of the things that we're doing there. And then I am a self-professed LinkedIn junkie with 15,000 connections. So
Love it.
always happy to connect on LinkedIn.
It's happening today, Ron. I'll just put in there New Edition, and you'll be like, I know this girl. I know her.
Oh, no.
Except if she does an actual video for you, Ron. Tell her now.
Oh no, I'm
gonna
the
have to
most.
work on some moves.
I don't do hula because I'm horrible. I'm the most horrible dancer. I'm a finger dancer, so that's all you'll get out of me. But no, okay. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I guess we're concluding, right?
We're wrapping up right now. I just want to say, from the Folke Institute perspective, if your company is ready to take that next step and start having those conversations we've been talking about, diversity, equity, inclusion, and storytelling, all of those things that create a better company culture, we just want to invite you to send us a message. And I did drop a link in the comments where you can connect directly with somebody from the Folke Institute here. That contact form, we'll reach out and we can help you have this hard conversation, because I know it's not a conversation that's easy for everyone to have. And like we said, it doesn't come naturally. People don't know how to do this just naturally. Right. And it's funny because every time I say do this naturally, now I think we don't do DEI.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna
come up with a new phrase. I'm not sure what it is yet, but it's coming.
No. And then we are working actually, but we do have an inclusion planner. We'll be sure to share in the comments later. But Anna, I think we just want to say please join us next month for our next live. We're excited about it.
We're going to be talking about Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. We've got 3 major things happening next month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, it's Jewish American Heritage Month, and it's Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. And we just happen to have 2 fabulous staff members at the Folke Institute that are of Asian Pacific Islander heritage. So we are going to invite them on and just talk about the theme advancing leaders, and talking about traditions and heritage and how they are part of your story and what that can bring to your company. It's going to be an awesome conversation, so I hope everyone can join us.
Yeah.
That's May 25th. So mark your calendars.
Yeah. Thank you again, Ron and Dr. Carrie.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
guys
me.
both
Been an
very
absolute
much. Thank you,
pleasure.
Ron.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon, okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
She'll see you on the next plane.
You're on the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.